Alright, so while I think it is good to talk about big issues, I also think it's important to talk about some lighter things. For myself to take a little break from these big serious topics, and also just to not make my channel be a place for just that only. I just don't want my channel to be a place where people are like, oh yeah, this is just a guy who just talks about everything that's wrong with the game. I want a little fun too. So with that being said, we're actually going to jump back about a month now, where a certain person decided to tell people to stop Koreans. So in my videos, I tend to use multiple sources, and Koreans are no exception. So the following week after he put out that video, I put out my video and I definitely said something good about Koreans, and within like 30 minutes of me posting it, he sent me a friend request. And my first thought was, oh shit, he's on to me. It's Jover boys. Now it was reset day, so I decided, I'll just let that friend request sit for a little bit. I'll go do some homework. So when I did finally accept and then talk to him, he was actually very normal, like not an actual schizo at all. Surprised the shit out of me. He actually just wanted to share some resources. But on to the actual subject. It got me a bit motivated to yap about where and how I see information. So starting off with Koreans and the information that we get from them. I think it's all very valuable information. It's good to see kind of what's coming in the future and get some insight / opinion from people who have done the content we haven't even gotten yet. Overall, they've done a lot of walking so we can run. We've had no content where we had to go in blind because there's always been a class or raid guide from Korean users. But there is a big problem with just simply only relying on Korean users. And it's not even because of them themselves. Even though we all play Lost Ark, we're playing a different game. Like, from how it sounds is our builds are basically on disc DLC. A lot of the stuff from the KR version is actually there, but they commented out and then they sometimes screw up and leave remnants. That's why we had that weird build where we had artillers, where some of its buffs were actually implemented in the game but not fully functional. So the point I'm trying to make is we've never really had a one-to-one same build, and I've talked about this in various other topics. Because even though we are getting the major endgame content in the same order they are, we are not getting the quality of life and all those balance patch changes at the same point of time as they got it in Korea. For example, the balance patch we are getting this month in January came out after Daemon release. Now we're going to have those and potentially even more balance patches by the time it launches. And when they make these balance patches, they're judging it off the latest raid. That's where they go and they look at their performance and their own metrics. Meaning that these classes are being adjusted for Daemon raid during the Daemon raid. So over here in the West, we don't have to worry about them being too weak for the Daemon raid because KR went through that for us and we get to benefit from the buffs. And all these balance patches have just been power creep. They've been increasing the floor and the ceiling on pretty much every class it touches. And that's where kind of Korean information slips through the cracks. The information they give us, while good, is more relevant to their version than ours. For example, right now people are talking about how Korean users say to have like level 10 gems for Daemon. I don't play in KR, so I can't say if that was really level 9s and 10s was more so the standard to always have in those raids in KR when you're pugging. But in our build, the Western build, we can generally get away doing content with less than what they would have in KR. Because even if we don't have level 9 and 10 gems on, we're gaining that power in the quality of life, in the balance patches, in the new classes in general. All these changes, they're overcompensating that. So it's always been weird to me that people try to compare KR and the West one-to-one player-wise when we've never really played the same game essentially. But I will say this, if you are pushing past 1580 and you are not pushing your gems past level 7, you're cheapo, and any kind of gatekeeping you get, you deserve. So really, when I look at KR information, while I do think it's useful, I kind of see it like looking at a beta build of a game. It's information that's really good to know, it's really good to see, good to understand. However, there is a high chance that it's going to be very different when I actually get my hands on it. It's something you really have to keep in mind when digesting information from other sources because they are not playing the same game. And to my knowledge, I don't think AGS and Smilegate have intentions to get us to parity, which is getting us one-to-one with KR. I think we will always be behind at least a few months. The closer that we get to closing that gap, the more valid and accurate their information will be for ours. But again, we don't plan on completely catching up, so it's a bit rough. And this isn't just like a West to KR thing because China launched with Cloud being excessively nerfed. Like the saws don't kill. But on top of that, they launched with really more recent balance patches. Like they got balance patches actually before us. So their power creep was actually just insane over there, and along with raids being easier, so they can get by with content that we did with even less. Now, when it comes to Korean databases like loawa, or whatever you want to call it, pretty sure Saivo mentioned this in his video, its ranking is not like a measurement of skill, It is a measurement of who got there first, basically, in just item level. So when it comes to looking at digesting information from that site, I personally use it to measure how popular certain things are. It is good to see kind of how the meta is shaping up in KR, and you can generally see that by just looking at percentages. And me, for example, I like swiftness classes. I like dominion classes, actually. So I didn't see anything in NA resources when it comes to a Dom full Swift Soul Eater. So using that said, I can see how common that kind of build is in KR, and also just see how people are running it, just in case I do decide to try it out in the future. I have some information to go on to where people have at least tried to use it. Now, when it comes to Western resources, there really is only the community guides in the community Discord. There was once a time where I would say Maxroll and Icy Veins are good places to learn about your classes, and while I do think they still can teach you something about your classes, it's kind of a gamble if it's up to date. Those are good sites for if you want to learn general information and things outside of classes. Some couple examples is one, they don't have updated runes on Igniter Sork still, and that class hasn't been changed in a very long time. If you play a Sork or you kind of pay attention to how the meta has been changing, the reverse gravity build has been a very popular thing lately. That is something that is just not present on Maxroll. And at first you might not think that the rune thing is a big deal, that's not up to date. But for example, their main build there, they use 3 different Galewind runes. They list 1 legendary and 2 epics. But right now in our servers, we have 2 legendaries. So this results in missing information of which of these 2 ones that have epic runes should get this other legendary that I have. And just so I'm not just picking on the Igniter Sword guide, I'm going to look at Pistolier. Now this one's a little bit nitpicky, I'm going to say, because them putting Grudge and not in the mandatory spot and putting it as an add-on graving, making it sound optional, is pretty wild to me, and that just should not be a thing. But when they talk about other engravings, they have no mention of using mass increase or propulsion, which are things that are pretty common in this meta. Well, propulsion may be a little less, but still it is a viable option and something you can use and something they neglect to talk about. Like Maxroll, for example, they only have like 5 or 6 editors to my understanding, so keeping these builds and stuff like up to date along with doing whatever else they do for Maxroll in the site, it is probably pretty hard for them to keep it up to date, and who knows really how dedicated they are to Lost Ark in general anymore. Which is the fundamental reasons why I always say the community guides these days. It is a for passion thing. So it's just overall really reliable to have sources that is very up to date and you know is being held up by a very passionate part of the community. But it's hard to recommend anything else besides the community guides and anything that's on the Lost Ark Nexus or anything from the community Discord. Which, on the topic of the community Discord, if there is by chance something that you do not understand or anything you need deeper explanation of in those community guides, you can absolutely open up that Discord, give yourself the role for whatever class you have this question about, and then you can just ask away from there. But generally, if you have a question to ask, somebody else has probably already asked it too, so always search for it before you actually ask it. In my experience with the community Discord, it has been very positive. People have been very receptive and very responsive. It's just overall been a very good experience for me. Because again, jumping back to what I said earlier when I looked at loawa about Dominion Soul Eater, even though it's not really mentioned in the community guide, they do talk about it a little bit there in the community Discord. Oh, and something I forgot to mention is something that you get very exclusively with the community guides, which is a clear damage breakdown. Because the use of meters is a bannable thing in KR, they do not really use it. In NA, it's kind of left in a morally gray kind of situation. So in most community guides, there's actually just a straight up damage breakdown percentage-wise of what skills do how much damage. It is just very useful information to know. It also really helps them expedite just their understanding of the class and be able to make the guides. Having access to this information just makes our understanding of the classes and the skills and the breakdown just that much more accurate. The irony, however, is even though we have all this information, all this stuff, we generally end up at the same builds that KR ends up with. And that's with them not having meters. Now, when it comes to other sources of information, Reddit, Inven, they're both kind of a gamble. Anyone can post on them. It's nothing special. I pretty much only look at Reddit when I want to find like just funny meme posts. Looking at YouTube can be pretty useful, but also keep in mind that not every video is going to apply to your build. By build, I mean your build of the game. Since we are an MMO, we are a live service game. It is really easy for this kind of content to go out of date really quick. If there is a new balance patch tomorrow, that invalidates every video about that class basically on how to build it, so keep that in mind. That being said, I watched many different guides people had for Soul Eater when it came out. Even though the community guide did exist and I could have read it to kind of try to understand the class before it came out, it is a lot easier for me personally to see a video and actually watch things go on and happen. I have to have a base understanding of things to use the community guides in the first place. I cannot absorb information just through textually. That's just not how my brain works. If I read a class guide, it's probably like 80% in one ear, out the other. Probably like a 50-50 with videos. And then most of my learning, the best way to learn is obviously hands-on. But I think that pretty much covers all the main sources of information that we get. It is probably kind of weird that I said, hey, YouTube can be a bit of a gamble while I am a YouTuber. I make content here. I'm just being honest with you guys. But all in all, I have the same view as Cypho. Information from anywhere can be good, but also it can be straight trash. It is hard to decipher what is good information and what isn't. And I think that can be particularly hard in the MMO space. The closest thing we have is to really just kind of see how people perform and what they've done in the game. Powder Snow was in the third group of the Thamine race. Stuff like that gives them good credentials, good credibility. So I guess to end this off, I would have to just say, look at multiple resources and question everything. Don't always just believe in your favorite steamer. See what I did there, Corti?